the ethics board meeting to order. The public meeting of the City of Tallahassee Ethics Board is live streamed today. I believe this may be the last one, and it's being recorded for future reference. There may be a delay with online communications, and we ask that all be patient who may be observing us. There are a number of people actively working behind the scenes to ensure the public has full access and that there are not any glitches in today's meeting. We thank those members of City of Tallahassee for their support. At this point, I ask Ms. Atkins to call the roll.
She's not present. I'll do it, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Payne.
I'm here.
Mrs. Barr.
I'm here.
Ms. Graham. Ms. Graham.
Here. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Ray. And Ms. Costa.
Here.
And of course, the chair. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you, sir.
Dwight, you don't have video, just so you know.
Okay.
Down at the bottom.
Now it's saying that I have video. I'm going to start it again and see what happens.
All right, once again, this meeting will be conversational. You don't have to raise your hand to speak to the public. You are currently on mute. There are several hosts managing the speaker access. And when we turn on the public microphones for your opportunity to speak, that will be facilitated then. We asked last week to make your request by email to ethics@talgov.com if you wish to speak on today's agenda or non-agenda items. Those who have submitted their names will be given a chance to speak as scheduled. We again thank the public for your interest. Your input is very important to us. Board members, received all of the supporting documents as well as the agenda. All right. With regard to the agenda, do we have any questions conducting today's business? At this point, I'll ask for approval of the last meeting minutes from September 15th, 2020.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. Well, the meeting minutes have been approved. We'll next move to public comment on agenda items.
Mr. Chair, I have one person, Peter Butsine.
All right. Is he available to speak at this point?
Let's see.
All right.
Just moved him over.
All right, Mr. Buxton, you have the floor.
Oh, it's not good. Oh, there he is. He's not showing video, audio or video. We may have to come back to him. I'm not seeing audio or video.
Okay, I'll do the ethics office report, and then we'll come back to public comments. So at this point, Mr. Floyd, it's on you.
Okay. Okay, the report, and you should have received the report. I actually gave it to you on a weekly basis, week of September 7th to 11. There are documents for the board meeting, complete draft of revised ethics guide, complete a draft of the new ethical standards of conduct course, responded to alleged ethics violations, and now we know what that means. Began working on strategic plans, scheduled board meetings, research alternatives, promoting campaign contribution reform program, and develop a plan, attended meetings with the board attorney, city attorney, and the inspector general to discuss inspector general ordinance, performed administrative functions, week of September 14th through 18th, coordinated board meetings, instruction and ethics class, responded to alleged ethics violations, and performed administrative functions. The week of September 21st through 25th, responded to ethics violations, drafted a training plan, and corresponded with human resource, revised the ethics, pros, ethics guides, follow up with public comments from board meeting, instructed an ethics class, performed administrative functions. 28th through 3rd, responded to alleged ethics violations, spoke with an independent contractor about developing online training, followed up on legal advocate support staff, worked with human resource and workforce staff to plan 2 training sessions for October, performed administrative functions on October 6th through 10th, organized the board meetings, prepared the board meetings agenda and materials, responded to alleged ethics violations, held meetings with board attorney and the chair, discussed joint web page with inspector general, the deputy, city deputy attorney, and the board attorney, held discussion with board members, held discussions with Tallahassee residents on lobbying ordinance,
Okay, yeah, I don't hear you though.
discussed with the inspector general plans for moving forward, and performed administrative functions. Those were my activities for the last 30 days. With regard to the budget report, you should have received a copy of the monthly budget report. It shows a balance, an ending balance of $89,118, which includes the fiscal year. And you see that all of the balances have been, everything has been balanced out and now shows a positive balance. You should have also received an annual report on the budget.
Oh, I think I may be on.
And then
You are. I can hear you.
the
Okay.
monthly
I
issue
don't know what you
report.
did, but that's some magic touch. Oh, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Richard.
Thank you.
All right. Then the monthly issue report, we received
Yeah.
one
Yeah,
hotline call. Where the caller asked for assistance with the swindler who defrauded her out of $500. I spoke with the caller and advised that she contact law enforcement. Those are the reports, and I recommend that this one complaint be closed. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Do you have any questions of Mr. Floyd concerning his ethics office report?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Spain?
I have questions on that. I just want to let you know, Peter Boutsine emailed me with an error message that he got in attempting to join. I forwarded that to Dwight,
Yeah.
so maybe he can
Yeah,
handle that.
I'm going to send his phone number to Harold because he's here. I actually put him in the panel, but he's not showing any video or audio.
Yeah,
So he's here, but he can't communicate.
yeah, he did get a specific error message that he could probably do.
Well, we try to work out the particulars of that. I think we should keep moving.
Yes.
And we can go now to agenda item 7A.
Before we do that, Mr. Chair, we need to vote to close the complaint on the monthly issue report.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, okay. Do I have a motion to take action on the recommendation of the ethics officer concerning the September 10th issue that was called in?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. We probably move second to adopt the recommendation of the ethics officer to close this particular issue that came through via the hotline. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right.
And a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
not necessarily on this issue, but it has occurred to me before. When someone calls in and suggests something to us that's a problem, and maybe this is something for the board attorney to think about. At what types of issues might trigger some responsibility for us to do some follow-up? For instance, if someone called in and said, I'm the subject of domestic abuse, or I'm the subject of child abuse, and I hope you guys can help me. It seems to me that we ought to do more than simply say, you called the wrong place, call someone else. When do we have an obligation? Under what circumstances might we have an obligation as a government entity to make sure that the issue is passed on to the appropriate authorities? Just a kind of an open question for some, future thought process.
Right. Yeah, that would be something that we definitely need to discuss. How are we as far as mandatory reporting for certain types of issues? Do we have that mandate as ethics board members?
Can I say,
Ms. Graham?
regardless, if there is something that we feel is an emergency situation, I think we are just as human beings obligated to take further action on it. We don't want to just have a situation where someone has called us, they're seeking help for one reason or another, and we don't act on it, and then something occurs. I think Mr. Floyd's going to have to use his very good judgment to determine, does it rise to that level? I will tell you, in my congressional office, we had situations where people would call and they would clearly be in distress, and I felt very committed to getting them the help that they needed. I think we are in the same position here as a entity that people look to for assistance. And so I don't know what the laws are in terms of requirements, but I just think my gut tells me that we should do what's right in helping someone if they're in dire straits. What do you think, Mr. Herring?
I agree. And I'm not saying that this issue rises to that level, but it has occurred to me in the past, since we get so many calls that are so far outside our little City of Tallahassee ethics box, that at some point, sooner or later, somebody's going to call with something that, somebody's planning to commit a crime. Then I think we've got an obligation to make sure that gets passed along. And I worry that we haven't talked about that. We don't have a policy. We haven't really set any parameters on that issue.
I was thinking more of, someone who is suicidal or something along those
Sure.
lines. But
Absolutely.
committing a crime would be also a concern.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I do think it's going to be a case by case situation. I think, from my perspective, what I don't want to do is get caught up in a situation where I'm trying to follow up on something that should be the individual's responsibility, and I'm in the middle of it. And especially a case like this one where she simply called the wrong resource, and it would have been more appropriate for her to call law enforcement, for law enforcement to address her issue. Things like suicide, we do have in our administrative procedures for addressing referrals, and with the oncoming of the Inspector General, there will be cases that will be referred to him also. So we do have a policy in place for referring issues. We just have to gauge how far we go in following up on those.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was thinking about, like, school teachers have some responsibility if they think a child maybe is in dire straits, and doctors under certain circumstances. Even lawyers have to report if their client is talking about committing a crime in the future.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things where there's a kind of an imminent danger to someone. And there may be some existing policies for certain types of professionals that we could learn from.
Okay. Yeah, that's, and I know I asked the question, fall up under that in 3 different ways in my capacity at FAMU. If someone called about something, I have to make sure I report to. I can't leave it to the individual to walk to the next office. I have to actually call. I guess I serve as a place of notice in some areas. So that's what I was thinking. I guess we would have to see what does the city say, because that may get Mr. Floyd. He may have some obligations as a city employee that we may not have as volunteer board members, since we won't be the ones receiving the calls. Typically, it would be Mr. Floyd or Mrs. Atkins. So that's something I think we do need to look into to make sure that we're in compliance with whatever the city has in place. And then other things, I would just think I trust Mr. Floyd and Miss Atkins to have common decency to help out, or the good discretion in a lot of situations that may come their way. But I do want to make sure as city employees that they are, if there are any mandates, that they're following those. So maybe that's something we can look into, or Mr. Floyd, you can ask. Mr. Reed?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think Chapter 39 provides mandatory reporting requirements for abusive children, vulnerable adults. We also have issues with Baker Act. I can't remember the one for substance abuse, but there's a similar act like Baker acting for that. We may want to flesh out our procedures. We do have, as Mr. Floyd stated, referral requirements. There's no time associated with those referrals, which is something we're working with the Inspector General on, issues that are within their lane of responsibilities, but that may be something we continue to flesh out, so we provide more airtight time limitations for referrals and what those reporting requirements might be.
All right. Thank you so much. So thank you again, Mr. Herring, for that. It was definitely something we should think about. So I thank you for bringing that up. And I think we just voted to close or to accept the recommendation for Mr. Floyd concerning this issue on the monthly issue report. So I think I see Mr. Butson's, I think I see his him showing. I see a headphones and the microphone. So are you there, Mr. Butson?
There we go. Okay. Sorry, this has been a challenge today. I appreciate everybody working with me. I was finally able to get in after having some difficulty. Okay, for the record, my name is Peter Butsine. I reside at 1628 Woodgate Way in Tallahassee, and I present the following brief remarks on behalf of Citizens for Ethics Reform relating to Agenda Item 6B. I simply wish to extend our sincere thanks to Mr. Floyd and Mr. Reed's reaching out to us for suggestions relating to improving Tallahassee's weak lobby registration and disclosure ordinance. We spent about an hour on the phone, and then we proceeded to provide a very brief one-page paper that consists of 12 points that establish our best practices recommendations for lobby registration and disclosure. That is included in your packet today, in addition to Mr. Reed's proposed improvements to the definitions of lobbying and lobbyist. Mr. Dwight also has included this 12-point proposal in your packet, and we suggest, together with Mr. Reed's revised definitions, that this provide guidance as the Independent Ethics Board considers improvements to Tallahassee's lobby disclosure and registration ordinance. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you so much, sir. Do we have any comments concerning the public remarks? All right. So I think I completely skipped over old business, which was Section 6. So now we'll have a report on the Inspector General Ordinance.
John?
Okay, is that for me?
Yes, sir.
Floyd? Okay, yes, so Mr. Floyd Nye, as he stated in his report, did have a very nice conversation with Dennis Sutton, who's the city auditor and will be the inspector general, or is the inspector general, as well as Amy Toman, the deputy city attorney. Currently, we're in the process of trying to create a landing page on the website where if individuals have complaints that they would like to bring, that would go to a page where they would get to choose between ethics and then those issues that would fall under the inspector general. Try to give the general public a fork in the better navigate through that process. And that's how we're looking to approach that as far as the online feature for submitting complaints. Still have our paper complaints, the forms that have been approved by this board. We are looking into the software we had talked about last time that's used by FSU, which we thought was very efficient, which creates an online filing process that might be more efficient than what we're currently utilizing. But this is a discussion we're going to continue with the Inspector General's office as well as the Office of the City Attorney to make sure that we're doing our job, they're doing their job. And if something comes our way that belongs to them, we'll provide it over to them within a certain period of time. And likewise, the same from them to our office. And I think I had mentioned at the last meeting, we'd like our procedures and their procedures to really mirror one another. So whatever is good for the goose will be good for the gander, and we'll be able to work together. So we will remain independent. We will be the independent ethics board, but there is this process, especially that intake process, where especially members of the general public may not know exactly which office to go to. We want to provide a central entry point and then guide them from that point going forward.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Herring.
I just want to put in a plug one more time as we continue these discussions that we make sure that whistleblowers and persons who file complaints get the appropriate protections that the law should allow, and that we do everything we can as we work the issue across the two offices to make sure that people don't lose the confidential nature of their complaint if it would have been confidential if made to the right person in the first instance.
All right. Duly noted. All right, Mr. Reed, you have the next two items as well?
I do the draft lobby ordinance. This is somewhat of a rerun for all of you. We addressed this, looks like back in May. I think we had previously addressed the issue of the definition of lobbyist and lobbying, and was circular. Lobbying means something done by a lobbyist. Lobbyist means you engage in lobbying. So it kind of went in circles. So what we attempted to do was to place the meat of the definition into the lobbyist section, and lobbying would just be communication between those individuals. They've raised some concerns about, and this is based on our meeting with our friends in the coalition who were very helpful, is that if somebody comes in and says, well, I'm just a consultant, when is someone a consultant and when are they a lobbyist, and how do we distinguish between those two issues? So I think we tried to provide a little meat on the bone for the current ordinance that would try to remove any of that ambiguity. And I think that we get kind of where we wanted to be. Some certain issues we do have on page 2 of your document, beginning on line 47, we do have some exceptions, which are obviously always important to your statute, who's not covered by this. So we have that in there as well. And then employees is broadened to cover not just employees, but independent contractors that would work for the city of Tallahassee. So in addition to the draft ordinance that you've already seen, as Mr. Budzine stated, the coalition has prepared 12 points that have not been articulated into the document that we saw in May, except for 2. So I wanted to bring this, and Mr. Floyd and I discussed bringing this to the board. If the board wanted to go through these items and there were issues that, we like this, kind of take an a la carte approach to their recommendations. If there's something the board would like to pursue, then I could go back into drafting mode and try to bring something to the next meeting. So I guess, Mr. Chair, at this point, I would just probably want to ask the board for further direction on which of the recommendations by the coalition they'd like to pursue.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, hold on, I'm trying. All right, there I am. Do we have any recommendations or suggestions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Payne?
I just had a question, really. Currently, the job of coordinating lobbyists and recording that they are properly registered is the job of Jim Cook, the city treasurer clerk. I'm wondering if there's been discussion with him about the possibility of our taking over that role in the same way that we're having discussions with Inspector General about possible duplicating of duties.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Aaron?
I had a brief exchange. That really goes to number 1
Okay.
on the list. And
Yeah.
I had a brief exchange with Mr. Butzine, and I think that I can accurately represent his thoughts that when he says we should have jurisdiction, it's really a jurisdiction over violations by lobbyists. Because I asked him if that was intended to say that we should do take over the lobbyist registration function, and what he responded to me was no, he thought that was fine with the city, but that he thought we ought to be clearly in charge of dealing with alleged violations. So just to clarify, I hope Peter, I'm not stepping on your toes, but
No,
to clarify
that's correct.
his point.
That's correct.
All right. Any other
Still
comments?
important to keep that communication line open with Jim Cook.
Very.
Recommendations, I think number 9, which requires their lobbyists to update their registration whenever they get a new principal, will be an important one to have.
Okay. You say you think that'd be an important one to have?
I think it'd be an important one you have to pursue.
Okay.
And that seems to be tied to number 2, because if they're not
Yep.
registering and saying who they're lobbying for, then there's nothing for them to update. in
Right.
Number 9.
Right. Has everyone had an opportunity to thoroughly review this, or would you need some time to look over it?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Payne?
can I get a definition of contingent lobbying as listed in number 8?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Reed?
it would essentially, if a lobbyist were to be retained for obtaining a grant, they would get a percentage of whatever grant they get, kind of like an attorney who operates on a contingency, a personal injury. They only get paid if they win, et cetera, that type of issue.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would be generally supportive of what Citizens for Ethics Reform has proposed here. I think one of the issues that is implicit in a couple of their recommendations is how do you figure out who's lobbying without registering, and that that to a certain extent falls on the person who's coming in to talk, but ultimately it's got to sort of fall on the city folks and the people scheduling the meetings to say, look, if you're being paid to come talk to us, if you've got a financial dog in the hunt when you come talk to us, then you may need to register to lobby, and they've got to kind of help to make sure that people are advised about this, the nature. So number 6 sort of hits at that point, as I think do a couple of the other items here.
I would like to hear Citizens for Ethics Reform concerning number 8. Why would they why do they take issue with that, with the contingent lobbying?
Would you like me to respond to that?
Oh, yo, you're still there? Yes, that would be
Yes.
great.
Okay. This is Peter Butzine. I've worked on lobby disclosure statutes at the state level and the federal level for since the 1970s, and and the organizations that I've worked for, which are your Common Cause, and also in a volunteer capacity, the Brennan Center and the League of Women Voters. The problem with contingency lobbying is that it puts phenomenal pressure to get a particular outcome. And that may be appropriate for attorneys in cases that go before the courts and have proper rules of procedure. In a political process, I would argue that contingency lobbying has no place in that kind of lobbying entity before a commission, because it puts phenomenal pressure to deliver a particular result. And as such, the lobbyist is under tremendous pressure to get that result. And I think that it produces inappropriate lobbying. As I say, for trial judges, for trial courts, that may make sense because there are proper rules of evidence in place, et cetera. But in a political forum, I would argue that contingent lobbying just puts too much pressure for a particular result and therefore is inappropriate.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Graham?
Hi, I want to ask a question of Peter. Peter, first, are you aware of language in other counties with ethics boards addressing the contingent lobbying issue?
Well, I haven't reviewed lobbying registration and disclosure ordinances at the local level. I know that there are some states that do it, and but I could do some more research. In fact, we've provided to the ethics board information with regard to ethics ordinances in other jurisdictions, but I've got to admit I haven't read all that material.
I'd just be curious. And secondly, as to number 5, how do you define an informal meeting?
Well, an informal meeting would be a meeting in the commission's chambers, okay, or a commissioner's chambers. But I think it would also mean informal communications just when a city commissioner is meeting, general public, like at a reception or something like that. We think that there are phenomenal opportunities to provide lobbying services at informal meetings, including things like receptions and the like. But certainly it also would include meetings in the chambers of the commissioners.
I'm just wondering, how do you, the onus, I'm not as concerned about the formal meetings, but the informal meetings, the onus of the need to have a log. Given the social nature of Tallahassee, not quite sure how that would be put into effect.
Well, I think it's possible to do it. When you have something like a reception and lobbyists are mingling with the commissioners during a reception, for the same reason the 2 commissioners would be violating the Sunshine Law if they conducted business that wasn't publicly noticed. It would certainly be possible for a commissioner to say, I spoke to such and such a lobbyist about such and such an issue. And I don't think that would be that difficult to do, but.
And I have a question for Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate your.
Thank you.
Or for anyone for that matter. Number 10, 6 years. What's the maximum time for state reps after leaving office? When can they become lobbyists?
I think we just amended the Constitution to make that 6 years, but let me double check on that.
Yeah, that's correct.
6 years.
Okay. And if I may just, I guess, respond to a question that Ms. Graham had regarding the contingency lobbying, that is actually prohibited by state law in Florida, it's section 11.047 makes contingency fee lobbying illegal, actually makes it a first-degree misdemeanor. They have an exception for claims bills, but that would not be applicable for local government.
Which, I mean, if it's law, we should, statute trumps anything that we could do.
Right.
But that's only applicable the state legislature lobbying.
Correct.
I don't think we should have any lesser standard.
Agree.
Now, Mr. Chair, if I may just address a couple
Yes,
of
sir.
issues regarding our jurisdiction, where our limits might be, because I know we had discussed this with the coalition. If you go into the charter amendment, section 61, subsection A states ethics code, the city commission shall within 6 months of the enactment of this charter provision enact an ethics or conflict of interest code with jurisdiction over the officers and employees of the city of Tallahassee, whether elected or appointed, paid or unpaid, and over the members, officers, and employees of any boards, commissions, or committees thereof. And I know this is an issue that we had looked at last year when we were amending our code on whether we could even get jurisdiction over lobbyists under the charter amendment as it's currently drafted. Now, if you go then into subsection B of that same section in the charter, is where they list some enumerated responsibilities of the board, and one of them is to have the authority to investigate complaints and to levy those civil penalties as may be authorized by the city commission for violations of the city's ethics code. So it appears that, and we had discussed that with the coalition on whether if we move the enforcement of the lobbying provision into the ethics code, would we then have the authority to enforce those restrictions? But then I think we have trouble reconciling that with the very first subsection, which says that the ethics code itself shall be limited to the officers or employees or members, officers, and employees of any boards. So I'm not sure whether the way the charter is currently drafted, we could get that jurisdiction. Now, we could always propose a charter amendment that could go either to the legislature or to the voters directly. Another issue too is in that same subsection B. We do have the authority, or hold on. We have the ability to propose ordinances, resolutions, or charter amendments to the city commission in all areas of ethics and corruption, including but not limited to, and then it lists a bunch of things, which I think this would, and lobbying is one that's actually enumerated there. So there would be nothing prohibiting us from proposing and recommending changes to ordinance for the board. And that is something I think we could very well do. But as far as our ability to enforce any of those restrictions or rules, that might be a little bit more difficult to reconcile with the charter as drafted.
Okay. All right. Any more concerning this?
Can I-
Yes, ma'am.
That seems like, we spent a lot of time talking about lobbyists. That seems like a threshold issue that we need to get an answer to before we invest much more time into this. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Reed?
Well, I think there's nothing that keeps us from recommendations to the city commission on what we think would be good practices. And I think that a lot of what is on this list, what we've already done so far, that is not within this. We're amending section 2-338, which is not within the ethics code. And the way the charter is, we just don't have the ability to enforce these provisions, but we can make recommendations
Is
as much as we want.
going to be any conflict with this issue with the Inspector General?
I don't think so.
I don't know if we've gotten that far yet. I think we're still trying to see what they would do, but I could see that being an issue.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an important, I mean, lobbyists are clearly have been an issue in the past, and we're trying to put in good practices for everybody's protection. That's the way I see it, but unfortunately, that's not the way others will necessarily see it. So I know how much hard work has gone into this. I would like to make sure that we have a path forward to have an impact before everybody spends a lot more time working on it. And the good folks who advise us have been spending a lot of time on this as well. Peter, what do you think about this issue in terms of what our authority is?
Well, I guess I agree with Mr. Reed that there certainly is authority to make recommendations regarding lobbying to the city commission. I think the issue of enforcement, jurisdiction over enforcement, is more difficult issue. And, I'm not an attorney, so it may be that the Independent Ethics Board may be overstepping if it seeks to have jurisdiction. At the same time, I will say, and one of the things that I'm happy to realize I'm not a lawyer, is that I think it makes common sense for the ethics board to have jurisdiction over enforcement. But if there is a legal issue involved that would require a change in the charter, I would be the first to say perhaps the ethics board should not pursue the jurisdiction. We would, however, strongly encourage the Independent Ethics Board to take up the entire issue of lobby disclosure and reform, and not just the very important issue of the definition of lobbying and lobbyist. Mr. Reed has, I think, solved that problem with his proposed language. However, he doesn't go further than that. It's only the definition. And to do a proper lobby disclosure and registration ordinance, we think requires consideration of the 12 points that were in our position paper.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have one last comment, but this goes to John's draft. And I continue to be concerned about someone who is a business owner. You could be a sole proprietor. You could be, a solo practitioner, and you're coming in to lobby the city or the city commission on behalf of your business.
Mm.
You clearly are not an employee. I'm assuming you're not an employee. You clearly are not a hired lobbyist. So I wonder if in the definition of lobbyist, we need to include a principal, or if you went to, for instance, to line 88 on page 3. If we said a principal means a person who has employed or retained a lobbyist, or who has acted as a lobbyist, get in that concept of somebody who, they're a business owner, but they clearly are doing their own lobbying. They're not going out and hiring somebody, but they are acting for all practical purposes, and in some ways maybe more effective than a lobbyist because they've got direct access to the business's money. Whereas the lobbyist has to go back to their principal and say, hey, can you, pony up a contribution or do whatever. So just that one very small change, as something to think about.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, just to clarify, I think at the end of line 88, just say or engaged in lobbying.
Yeah, something like that. Or it could even be a string of verbs, which has employed, retained, or acted as a lobbyist. Somewhere in there is the concept that I'm thinking about, because we have some very small businesses, some pretty much independent business people who take on projects and they seem almost as individuals to come before the commission. And the fact is they're not hiring somebody to represent them or their business. They're representing themselves.
All right. Anything else concerning this matter?
So, Mr. Chair, is it the wish of the board for me to draft, based on recommendations, some language that we may want to propose to the city commission and bring back to the board?
I believe so.
Okay. I can do
All right.
that.
And so does that take us to agenda item 6C, I believe. The revised ethics guide.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is 6C, Revised Ethics Guide. At the last meeting, we discussed making some changes to the cover page to make it clear that this is the property and product of the Independent Ethics Board. We replaced the picture of the City Commission and removed the city mission statement and vision statement from page 2. We moved a paragraph explaining the difference between the ethics code gift ban and the city's policy on gifts to a subheading on page 6 entitled Gift Ban versus Acceptance of Gratuities. And we added a subheading to briefly explain the Office of Inspector General Fraud Hotline on page 7. Before I make the recommendations, I would take any questions. Well, the recommendations, the board approved the revised guide. And of course, I'm open to any other suggestions or questions.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Payne.
I had one suggestion. In the same way that we removed the picture of the city commission, the organizational values on the underneath the picture of the city building, those are the organizational values of the city, not of the ethics board. And I think it's good that we highlight them, especially since the first one is ethical behavior. But maybe we could specify that these are the organizational values of the city of Tallahassee.
Okay. That sounds okay to me. Mr. Floyd?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll try to make it clearer. If you look up top, I put City of Tallahassee above the picture, but I'll figure out a way to make it more explicit.
Thank you.
All right.
And I put that building because that's our home. That's where we are.
Yeah, I got that.
All right. Guess that takes us to board amendments. Section 7, or agenda item 7, excuse me.
So, Mr. Chair, am I free to publish this, or do you want to make that one change and bring it back? I can make that change with your approval.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I think we have one bylaw amendment and 2 amendments to our procedures. This is our second reading for each of them. I could go through each one by one, and we could move for approval if the board wishes on each one or all together. So bylaw amendment 2020-05 is a narrow change. It's all the language is republished until page 4, beginning on line 103. Essentially, we removed language that laid out procedures in our bylaws and simply referred to our procedures. So we would keep our bylaws as our bylaws and our procedures as our procedures. So that's just really some cleanup language. It doesn't do anything substantively because our time limitations are going to be laid out in our procedures. And would you like to move to adopt, or do you want to do them as a group?
We can do them as a group.
Okay. Administrative Procedures Amendment 2020-01. This is our second reading. This was provided some time limitations on when we would act on the complaints. Last time at our meeting, we were concerned about having a timeline that was based on when our monthly meeting would be, because if we got a complaint just days before the meeting, it may not give us enough time to meet those time requirements. So we made those changes. just so you could see the differences between the changes made at the last meeting and the changes made at this meeting. A single underline or a single stricken is a change that was made at the last meeting. A double underline and a double stricken are changes that were made at this meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Administrative Procedures Amendment 2020-02, second reading. This deals with the preliminary investigation. It provides, it kind of designates what the ethics officer is allowed to do and permitted to do, including but not limited to. The way we had it written, it was somewhat ambiguous, and I think Mr. Floyd and I have been trying to work through this process to figure out, okay, what's the best way. Some learning pangs have been present throughout this process. So I think we've laid out some procedures on what is able to do. We also provided language on if the city employee is represented by counsel, how do we handle that issue? And if the person is represented by counsel during the preliminary investigation, and this is consistent with the way it's done at the state, is that it would just somehow be placed on the record that the attorney is there on behalf of the individual.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
just one question for you, Mr. Reed. On line 12 on 2020-02, where it talks about a review of all facts and persons materially related, would it be wise to add a qualifier to say all known facts or all identifiable facts or something, just so that it's clear that it isn't, when you say all facts, it implies to me that you've gone out and done some kind of thorough investigation to get all the facts. And I thought this was more preliminary, based on kind of what we know today without doing the full-blown no holds barred investigation.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may respond. I think the intent of this, just so you can understand where we were, is we wanted to make sure that if we received a complaint and they said, we're filing a complaint against Mr. Smith, and we go and we investigate Mr. Smith and find out Mr. Smith didn't do anything wrong, but we found that Mr. Jones actually did something wrong, that we wouldn't be precluded from then pursuing action against Mr. Jones. So that was intent of having the all facts and persons material related. So if we started down one rabbit hole and we found something
Right.
that maybe would be relevant to our mission, that we wouldn't be prohibited from pursuing that. So, but as far as all known facts, I mean, that would be up to the board's preference.
I mean, I'm okay with it as it is. I would withdraw that comment.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I'm responding to an email, someone who can't talk online. Had two comments. One had a question at line 105 of 2020. Let me go back. On line 37 of 2020-OT2, she says that's probably be C. It's line 37. John.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll reserve the other one until we get to 2020-05.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
absent any other questions or comments, I would move approval of all three of these changes.
Mr. Chair, I just have one more for 2020-05.
2020-05.
Yes, line 105. There was a question, who is the report being provided to? That was the question.
What was that question?
On line 105, the question is, and this is Amy Tolman, who is the report being provided to?
Okay.
Oh,
It just says the complaint.
Okay.
that would
It
be
doesn't say who
to
should
the
be
subject of the
presented to.
complaint.
Okay. Hold on.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, I think it would be after the comma of redacted. Hold on. Da-da-da. Oh, okay. Okay. That it simply refers out to the procedures. So who documents are being presented to will be set by our procedures. So we may have to present something to the complainant. We may have to provide a report to the respondent. So I think
So you're saying it's referencing Rule 1.03, so you have to go to 103 to,
yes.
gotcha. Okay. All right, that makes sense.
And then we address that in 2020-01. Just
Yeah.
some of it, not all of it though.
I believe we have a motion on the floor to accept all three amendments. Did anyone second? All right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Takes us now to,
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you for all your hard work. I believe that takes us to the strategic plan.
Yes, sir, and I've been working on a strategic plan, but I have something guidance that I can work from as we move forward. In this issue, I tried to take a different approach. In this issue, I outlined the priorities as I view them, as I thought you would view them, and I'm asking for the board's input on simply if you think something is out of order here in as far as priorities are concerned, restate that order for me, and that will help me as I develop the strategic plan. So I have processing complaints as top priority, then facilitating training, updating the bylaws, administrative procedures, recommending ordinance revisions to the city, updating the ethics guide, which we just finished, updating the ethics board webpage, which will soon be a priority, promoting the campaign contribution refund program, and submitting advisory opinions. Is there anything that's missing in terms of priorities, and is there anything you would change in the order of priority?
Only thing I would do, I would just add to number 6, the update the ethics board webpage, and to create and sustain a social media presence.
Uh, And by the way, there is a ethics Facebook page that was apparently maintained by Julie. I haven't delved into it to see if I can remove it, change it, or whatever, but it is out there.
Okay. Yeah, and if you maybe have like little ethics Twitter moments, about once a week or something like that. Or posting articles from other jurisdictions that may be pertaining to ethics, things like that, little links to those.
I got it. Okay. Anyone else have any input?
Mr. Floyd, my only thought is that the advisory opinions, while we haven't done any of them, and I'm not sure that we ever would, those would be, if we had a request for an advisory opinion, I think that would come in fairly high on our to-do list.
Okay, so do you think it should be number 2?
Well, because it's a low frequency event, maybe move it up to like number up between 4 and 5, somewhere in there. Just because if a city employee did ask, I would think we would take it very seriously and respond to them as quickly as we could.
Okay. And we do have record of some here in the office that I plan on putting on the website. So we do have some that have been responded to. Anyone else? If not, thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. That takes us to agenda item 9, ethics officer evaluation. Everyone should have received the job description as well as the evaluation and returned it to Ms. Atkins. Ms. Atkins, did you receive them all? Are you on? Mr. Floyd, did you want to speak to that?
Okay, give me just a moment because I thought she sent it to you all. She sent it to me, so I'm gonna pull it up here. There we go. Just a second.
Did you not hear me?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Receive all.
I have an email that's entitled Tally, but it just had a copy of my evaluation I submitted.
Now,
Just a minute. Give me just a second. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I think that's just one. I don't think that's the tally of all.
This is the one she sent to me as the tally.
Right, that's just one. That's not the total tally of everything. That's just one individual.
I'm
Oh, okay. Well,
So you can follow up. We can
yeah.
follow up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that'll be something we'll table to another time.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fine.
The tallies, uh, tally for one was 4.6.
Lucy, I'm getting about every third syllable you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uh,
We may
Four.
just have to receive it via
right,
email,
I'll
and
get a
that'll be some
copy.
information we can have.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
I would like
Alright.
to make a comment. Can I make a comment, please? This is such an important responsibility. I take evaluations very seriously. And I think Mr. Floyd has come into this position under very unique, wait, you should never qualify unique. You can either be, Mr. Floyd has come into this position under unique circumstances. And I'm really looking forward to getting back to when we can have more interaction, personal interaction. I found it very difficult to truly evaluate Mr. Floyd, given what the last months have held. When did you come on board?
In February.
Yeah, so it was right before we all went into COVID world. So
Yes.
I just want to put that out there because I do think that an evaluation is a difficult task to undertake, but it's one that we should all do, recognizing that it's our obligation to this board as well as to Mr. Floyd to evaluate him honestly and accurately. And I truly did not feel, given endured the last months, that I could do that. I think Mr. Floyd's doing a fabulous job as someone who was a member of this body before Mr. Floyd came on board. You're a welcome presence. But I just want to say that I look forward to an opportunity where I can have more personal information to make an evaluation for everybody's benefit on the board as well as for Mr. Floyd. And that's the end of my little comment.
All right. All right. Really appreciate that. So if you could get that information to us, Mrs. Atkins, the final tally, that'll be something that we can use as we move forward. At this point, we'll move to public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone registered to speak, Mr. Floyd?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. With that, we move to discussions regarding items desired for future agendas. Does anyone have anything they'd like to contribute at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Spain.
I believe the governor's order allowing for online meetings is coming to an end. And I think maybe Mr. Floyd mentioned this, that this may be our last online meeting. I'd be interested in any plans that have been made so far, and also it might be appropriate to move Mr. Floyd's evaluation until we are meeting live. Have there any plans been made?
Mr. Floyd and Mr. Reed discussed. We had some discussions earlier about what a in-person meeting might look like. Mr. Floyd, you care to expound upon that?
Yes, the city has one room that it has accommodated to deal with COVID-19, and that's the chamber. And the chamber is held by another group, CRTPA or something like that. And they have it until about 5 o'clock every month. I spoke with the executive director of that group, and as a compromise, he said he would work with us if we could start our meeting at 4:30 instead of 4 o'clock. he would move his meeting back. He's starting at 1:30. He would go back to 1 o'clock, and it would allow us to start at 4:30. And if we did that, we could use the commission city chamber or city commission chamber room. And the reason I'm interested in that room is because there's a lot of spacing, a lot of room to space. Anyone who comes to the meeting, there are separators, a little walls in between the members. So it's the safest place to hold an in-person meeting. So before I go into other alternatives, my recommendation to the board is that we start at 4:30 instead of 4 o'clock. This meeting has actually been about an hour and 15 minutes. So if we start at 4:30, we should be out of the building still by 6 o'clock. So that would be my recommendation.
I think that's good as far as I'm concerned.
Only have one question. If I'm in favor of 4:30, but Mr. Floyd, could you ask them, would there be a limit on people within the gallery? So if so, we could post that prior to our meeting, so the public will have an idea. Maybe they have to get there a little early if they want a space, or if not, they would, because we would be able to videotape live from there as well, correct?
Correct.
All right, so they'll have access via television and computer still. But if they want to be in that number, there may not be a cap. I don't know, but that's something I think we need to try to find out so we can announce it on our site.
Yes, I'll check. The city treasurer clerk emailed me while we were having this meeting. He's offering his assistance, so I'll get with him. I'm almost absolutely sure that there isn't a limitation because it's a huge room, and that's the whole point of having a room that's big enough to space people. I doubt we're going to have a number that we would have to be concerned with.
And will masks be mandated for us as we sit where we sit, or will they be able to put plastic dividers between our seats up there?
There are plastic dividers. I'll have to ask about what the other requirements will be.
Okay. And I think we did discuss what happens if we have a board member who opts out of meeting in person for whatever the
Right.
personal issues may be. Because I think we discussed quorum and voting, being able to vote even if they're not present. So I guess we need to really formalize that so we, no board members will be surprised at the last minute.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The executive order is 246, extended 69 and all of its subsequent extensions through November 1st, but it's limited to the physical quorum requirement. We do have in our procedures provisions that allow members to participate telephonically or via video conference.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I would ask that anybody who is concerned about meeting contact me. What we have to do is make sure we have a quorum that's physically present. And then if someone wanted to stay in an environment where they feel is safe and attending the meeting digitally, we can accommodate them.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bain?
The only other thing that I had a concern with, and I have communicated with Jim Cook about, is the use of shared microphones for speakers. And I gave him some options as far as possibilities for covering the microphone, that something that wouldn't muffle as much as a face mask. But I think Mr. Floyd can talk to Mr. Cook about that to see. There should be some procedure at least to disinfect the microphones, even our own microphones, so that we don't infect the city commissioner or the other way around. So just a thought to keep in mind.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. Do we have any further directives for Mr. Floyd or for Mr. Reed or of myself? Well, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
All right. Y'all take care and be safe.
See you guys next month.
All right.